Why take Superman, a comic book character, so seriously? Well, what does Superman represent in our very real society? Maybe you will say, truth, justice, and the American way. To which I question, so he is a fictional character meant to represent very real notions that we want to look up to, reflecting our very real society. Isn't that taking him seriously already? In any case, what Snyder and Goyer have given us is a Superman more reflective of the reality that we live in, validating him as a symbol to look up to in the first place. It's been a little over a year since Man of Steel released in theaters. Needless to say, the response has been across the board. It has received both passionate negative criticism, passionate positive criticism, and everything in between. I passionately love this film. I regard it as a masterpiece, and we need more movies in Hollywood that convey the same level of passion as in this film. There is so much to this movie that I cannot begin to cover all the symbolism and imagery, but I will cover enough to be able to present a possible interpretation of the film. From here on, I present my thesis on Man of Steel, that this movie elegantly and masterfully layers Jesus and symbolism with visceral birth imagery that plays as a deep allegory associated around the Superman mythology and the ideals he is meant to inspire. We begin with the launch. Amidst a Krypton nearing its catastrophic end, Jor-El launches KalEl, the last hope of Krypton, the hope that Jor-El held in his hands. Upon viewing the exterior of the Citadel, one sees that it is shaped in a peculiar way. This is phallic imagery. We see that KalEl is placed in a pod that is launched straight through the roof of the Citadel. After being launched, Jor-El says to Zod that KalEl is beyond his reach. Phraseology often used in the context of douching, where sperm can often be beyond the reach of a douche and thus is not an effective way to prevent pregnancy. That is, of course, Zod's entire purpose, to prevent the pregnancy. He even pleads with Laura to abort the launch, but of course, Zod will not be effective in preventing the pregnancy. In a very literal way, KalEl even carries the genetic payload of all Kryptonians. But metaphorically, he represents the single seed of hope amidst Krypton's tragic demise. The launch itself is a very euphoric moment in the scene. Even the music reaches a climax and character emotions are high. This imagery is reminiscent of ancient Egyptian mythology regarding how the god Atum created the universe. Wikipedia says, referencing Wilkinson's Complete Gods and Goddesses, to explain how Atum did this, the myth uses the metaphor of masturbation, with the hand he used in this act representing the female principle inherent within him. It is easy to see that in this case the female principle is Laura-El. The male principle is therefore naturally Jor-El. Thus, Krypton, the planet itself, is a god personified through Jor-El, who inevitably plants his seed from the heavens, impregnating Earth. Perhaps the god Krypton was angry at a lethargic Kryptonian society for harvesting its core, rather than looking to the stars. KalEl therefore represents the last seed of hope of Krypton, ejaculated into the cosmos to start anew. The most important thing about this intro segment is that it sets the stage for the rest of the movie to be about a birth, and logic dictates that it be a birth of Superman, where Krypton is the father and Earth is the mother. In fact, in Man of Steel, the entire origin of Superman is told through the metaphor of a rebirth of KalEl as Superman. A beautiful way to organize Superman's different identities into an origin story. As KalEl crashes on Earth, we jump to Clark crashing into a wave out at sea. In fact, the whole segment up to when Clark is shown working at the bar, we are treated to images involving a lot of water. There are two ways in which one can understand the presence of water. The first way is in reference to baptism. Clark undergoes his own baptism after saving the workers on the oil rig, thus demonstrating he is the promised Messiah. After falling into the water, we see him rise up out of the water. Instead of a dove descending, he seems to be greeted by a seagull descending from the heavens. We then flash back to another baptism scene where he saves the students in the bus while being drenched in water in the process. The baptism is complete after John Kent exclaims, "You are my son, but out there you have another father who gave you another name." In another sense, the big ocean is symbolism for the environment of a sperm cell, KalEl's perspective of being lost and trying to navigate in a big world. As a sperm cell enters the mother, they enter into a new and vast landscape in which they have to swim to reach the egg. We are given a flashback where young Clark is scared of this big world that he can see with his heightened senses. He says, "The world's too big, Mom." She comforts him by saying, "Pretend it's an island out in the ocean. Swim towards it." So what is the it he is swimming towards? Logically, it must be the egg that will nurture and help develop Superman. In what sense is he swimming towards it? The answer can be determined by noting that every time we see Clark swimming surrounded by water, he is saving someone. His good-natured and simple desire to want to save people is what ultimately guides him closer to the egg. For example, we see him save the bus full of kids, again surrounded by lots of water, swimming the bus towards land. It's a direct result of this action that he forces John to tell him about what he is and what he should be searching for. John says, "I have to believe you were sent here for a reason. Even if it takes you the rest of your life, you owe it to yourself to find out what that reason is." Further, we just got done seeing him swim towards an oil rig. To keep his identity and abilities obscure to the public eye, he is forced to change jobs whenever he saves someone using his powers. So saving people, embracing his powers, keeps him moving, inevitably moving towards the egg. With Martha telling him to swim towards it, and John telling him even if it takes him the rest of his life, he owes it to himself to find out what that reason is, we see that the role of the Kents is to guide him to that egg. The egg in Man of Steel is where Clark learns the reason he was sent to Earth. This is also where he learns some of the core principles that Superman embodies, such as hope. We can be certain this is the egg by noticing some subtle bits of symbolism in regard to how Clark is shown to enter the scout ship. He has to burrow through an outer layer of ice using his heat vision before he reaches the scout ship. This directly mirrors how a sperm cell burrows through the outer layer of the egg using a burst of enzymes emanating from the head of the sperm. Within the scout ship, he learns his name, where he came from, and the symbol of hope that his actions and character can represent and inspire. He learns how Earth has contributed to his abilities and traits. Does all this mean this is the birth of Superman? No. Simply putting on the suit does not mean he is reborn as Superman yet. He's just grown his skin, so to speak. Or in other words, this is merely a transfiguration of Clark Kent, a change in form. The transfiguration is considered one of the critical stages in the life of Jesus. He is changed into a reflection of his true self, changing his clothing with his divine glory being radiated from him. Snyder shows us that we should think of KalEl as not fully developed as Superman at this point. How does he do that? Well, back in the scout ship, when Jor-El is explaining to Clark his history, we see a shot of a woman and a man holding an unborn baby. Notice that the baby is held up by the mother on the right and the father on the left. Keeping in mind Jor-El told him that he is as much a child of Earth as he is of Krypton. This directly mirrors the shot where we see Superman just leave the scout ship. We see a spherical object to the right of Clark. By symmetry, we know the thing on the left was meant to be a sphere, but instead it is destroyed. This is consistent with a young, alive planet Earth, the mother, whereas the father, Krypton, on the left is mangled and destroyed. Notice also that this scene is similar in tone to how the transfiguration of Jesus is usually depicted, with Moses on the left and Elijah on the right, Moses representing the old way. They are holding up a still developing Superman. That is, this is not the fully born Superman yet, but we are treated to something of an ultrasound, seeing how he is developing. To be Superman, his relationship with humanity needs to be fully explored and understood. Once he has found the egg, he has a last supper with Martha Kent. Zod arrives and requires Clark to surrender. Although his gut instinct tells him Zod can't be trusted, he is not sure about humanity. After talking to a priest, he takes the leap of faith and surrenders to humanity. He reveals himself through a miracle as he floats in the sky with a halo or sun behind his head. They turn him over to Zod, and Zod tempts Clark with the idea that he can save what remains of his race, but he rejects Zod's plan in favor of Earth. Zod, being stubborn and one-track minded, wants Krypton in place of Earth. This is where we first see him actually fight for humanity. We see his faith in humanity is rewarded in a few ways. First, we have Lois Lane, who, given every reason to give up his secret, doesn't, and thus puts her faith in Clark as well. During the fight in Smallville, we see the military shoot at Clark. Clark doesn't fight back. His faith, again, is rewarded when Colonel Hardy says this man is not our enemy. This directly mirrors the flashback we saw earlier, where we see a bully push him and try to get him to fight back, but he holds back. He also is reminded that an old bully can change. Again, the hope in others to be a force for good is a recurring theme, and is intimately tied to his decision to trust and fight for humanity. Now that Clark has actually physically fought back against the Kryptonians, his choice is clear to Zod. Zod then begins to force KalEl to make a series of decisions, or sacrifices, inevitably forcing the rebirth of KalEl as Superman. Alternatively, one can think of it as an ascension into his identity as Superman. These sacrifices are metaphorically shown as critical stages in the development and birth of Superman. Although these decisions conflict with Jor-El's initial intent to ensure the survival of his species, Jor-El would likely understand given the circumstances, because Jor-El also said that he will be free to forge his own destiny. That is, the choices Clark makes come from himself, and are his alone based on his raw understanding of right and wrong, not simply because someone told him to follow through with something. Before we proceed, I'll take a moment to talk about an important aspect of labor. Babycenter.com conducted a survey where women gave descriptions of labor contractions. Some women described labor as more of a pounding or punching feeling. It is like being slammed in the uterus with a sledgehammer. Having contractions felt like being hit with something really hard. Each contraction felt like getting punched in the stomach, the type of punch that knocks all the air out of you. It was like getting punched in the back and the stomach at the same time. Also, many women described the contraction's wave-like effect. Each contraction felt like a wave of pain that rose, peaked, and fell. I could feel each contraction coming on, building and building, then peaking and coming down. When I felt real contractions, they would usually start to tighten at the lower part of my vagina and continue to tighten everything moving up to the top of my uterus. The tightening would cause my stomach to compress downward. You will start feeling some burning and stinging in your vaginal opening due to dilation, and you will feel your cervix begin to open. It is the worst pain ever, and every few hours they get stronger and last longer. But all that pain is worth it. By now you may see that when Zod says initiate, Earth begins to undergo contractions. We see that there is a slamming down on either side of Earth that goes back and forth in a wave-like pattern. We also see that this slamming down expands as it progresses. This exactly reflects what happens to a woman when she is about to go into labor. Earth is therefore beginning the final stage, the contractions that are there to expand the cervix so that the baby can pass through the birth canal. So why is labor about to begin? Because Superman will have to make a series of sacrifices that will inevitably refine his understanding of the ideals he wants to embody, and also make him much more deeply connected with humanity as a whole. The first sacrifice is a crucifixion. He destroys the world engine. That is, he destroys the chance for Krypton to exist again. This scene beautifully layers the birthing imagery on top of the direct literal narrative. When the guy says Colonel Hardy is on his way, they've got Superman in tow, that directly mirrors having a baby in tow. We hear Colonel Hardy say that he's got the package in tow, and it immediately cuts to a shot of Superman. When Jenny screams, we have a personification of Earth's pain and struggle as the contractions get closer and stronger, destroying not only infrastructure but killing people in the process. When Lombard says push, push, they're getting closer. That directly mirrors being in the delivery room, telling the mother to push. Perry White and Lombard are even in a position as if they were delivering a baby. Perry holds Jenny's hand to comfort her in her pain while she is screaming. We hear Colonel Hardy say, "Are we clear to make the drop?" directly mirroring the term drop, a term used during pregnancy when the baby drops settling into the abdomen in preparation for a vaginal birth. We see the cervix expanding, and we finally see Superman be forced up through the cervix. We even see a cross created by the backdrop of the ocean water. The scene is a triumph of filmmaking in and of itself. It works both on a pure aesthetic level, the music and the visuals, and it also works on an emotional level, Jenny's raw, naked fear, and that even a hard-ass like Perry White stays in the most grim situation to provide just that bit of comfort, a tiny seed of hope amidst tragedy. The next sacrifice is a burial and resurrection. Zod says if you destroy the ship, you destroy Krypton. Initially stunned with this dilemma, we see Superman regain resolve in seeing the big picture and realizing that this ship needs to be destroyed. He splits open the ship and we see it crash into Metropolis. We also see water burst from the Genesis chamber. This directly mirrors the baby breaking the amniotic sac, the membrane, resulting in a gush of outpouring water. That is, the water breaking. We also see that the ship crashes into the ground, effectively burying Superman, only to be resurrected from his entombment to reveal himself to Lois Lane.
Jenny! Jenny, where are you?
I'm here!
Jenny!
Here!
Hold on.
I'm stuck. I can't get free, I'm stuck.
It's okay, we'll get you out of there, all right? You just sit tight.
No, don't leave me, please don't leave me.
We're not gonna leave you.
Okay.
Lombard! Get your ass over here and help me!
Damn it.
We just gotta move this.
Here. Slide in there. You push up, okay? Get closer, come on, push! Northcom, this is Guardian. Are we cleared to make the drop?
Negative, Guardian. Target that aircraft.
Target locked.
Stop! If you destroy this ship, you destroy Krypton! Krypton had its chance!
The final sacrifice is the ascension into his identity as Superman, a rebirth of Kal-El as Superman. And so we arrive at one of the more controversial aspects of this film, the fact that Superman is forced to kill Zod. It's the last forcing or pushing of Superman into existence. The final sacrifice. But so far, the sacrifices have been a Krypton versus Earth thing. In fact, the final sacrifice is also a Krypton versus Earth thing. If we go back to when Jor-El first talks to Clark in the scout ship, one notices that he mentions that Superman can embody the best of both worlds. One is left to wonder, what is the best of both worlds? Logically, within this story, the best of Krypton is the notion of hope, and the best of Earth is represented through the sacrifice of Jesus in order to save humanity. There is symbolism of him consciously making the decision to embody the best of both worlds after he decides to take a leap of faith for humanity. In fact, when he floats out of Zod's ship, we see him in a cross position. This isn't just some surface-level allusion to Jesus, this is a subtle portrayal of his conscious choice to embody the best of both worlds. We see both the hope symbol and Jesus symbol embodied in Superman. Zack Snyder takes a bold and authentic approach to Superman, an approach more reflective of our reality, that sometimes our ideals clash with one another, depending on the situation. Sometimes, in certain situations, we have to give on one ideal for another ideal. For example, security versus privacy. They're both ideals, but certain situations require us to put more weight on one over the other. Instead of thinking about adhering to ideals absolutely, as in 100% security and 100% privacy, we use both of these ideals as guiding principles to inform our decisions in any given situation. Indeed, the act of killing Zod is a situation where Superman had to, again, decide one ideal over the other. How does this work exactly? Recall that Jor-El says that embodied within the ideal of hope is the fundamental belief in the potential of every person to be a force for good. Every person includes, yes, even Zod. This movie gives us a very clear understanding of why killing can be right, but also a tragic situation. It is right because Zod was a genocidal maniac that wanted to kill others to get what he wanted, and had no other reason to live. It is bad because killing someone is the ultimate statement that says this person could not be a force for good, or in other words, there was no hope for Zod. And from Superman's perspective, that's a very tragic situation. When Superman killed Zod, he realized what killing meant in regard to the ideals he wanted to embody. When being put in such a situation, he saw how ugly reality can get. He learns that ultimately, these ideals are guiding principles as opposed to moral absolutes. He learns to use these guiding principles to navigate in a complex, chaotic, and often inconvenient reality. that if he hopes to embody these ideals, he has to understand how extreme certain people can be and take conscious measures against being put in that situation again to the best of his ability. That with all his power, he cannot ultimately control the choices others make. Snyder underscores this by emphasizing that this rebirth is an ascension analogous to Jesus' ascension into the heavens. So again, in this last sacrifice, he sacrifices one ideal for the other, forced by the hand of a Zod that had nothing else to live for and clearly stated he would fight to the death. After killing Zod, he falls to the floor, gazes into this new world, a new understanding, and lets out a scream. This is what a baby does when they are born into this world. Initially, I wanted to find a video to compare with in order to bolster my claim that this is indeed meant to be the birth. However, I remembered that Snyder supplied us with one in the very beginning of the film. Then I thought, if I'm right about at least most of this, then perhaps Snyder edited the two scenes in a similar way. Certainly, any masterpiece deserves a masterstroke, and in one of the most subtle I have witnessed in cinema in general, and especially in a big-budget action-packed superhero film, we see that, indeed, the scene was intended to be the birth of Superman. As Superman drops on the left panel, KalEl is born on the right panel. The drop therefore indicates the moment of birth. We see that in place of Laura-El, we have Lois Lane. Lois mirrors the role of Mary Magdalene, who is commonly portrayed with red hair. Mary is described as courageous, brave enough to stand by Jesus in his hours of suffering, death, and beyond. We see a slow build-up to a scream in both cases. We also see Superman on his knees facing left as the halo emanates from a newborn Superman's head, indicating his ascension into his identity as Superman. This is genius filmmaking, so let's see that again. One should address the apparent contradiction in that he kills to ascend, that he steals clothes from the back of a truck after his own baptism. This is all to say that although he undergoes his own rebirth, symbolically identified with the story of Jesus, he is not Jesus. He represents something different. One possible interpretation can be based on the passage from Luke 5:36, symbolically portrayed when he steals clothes from the back of a truck. The passage says, "No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. Otherwise, he will both tear the new, and the piece from the new will not match the old." That is, this new era Man of Steel brings simply cannot be wed to the old kryptonian practices. The new era is where morality of the action lies in the context of the action, and is not inherent in the action itself. We see this most vividly by comparing the fact that Kryptonians didn't want to sully their hands to kill Zod, but Superman did kill Zod. Kryptonians are analogous to the Old Testament, where Superman brings the New Testament of choice, chance, aspiring to something greater than what society intended. It is a new way that is more in tune with the natural complexities reality presents us with, rather than mindlessly adhering to old principles without looking at the big picture. To bolster this interpretation, we also see Jor-El appear to steal the Codex in the eyes of Zod. Jor-El also says he had a natural-born child who will be free to forge his own destiny, to which a myopic Zod replies, "Heresy." John Kent also saw the big picture when he responded to Clark about saving the kids with maybe, foreshadowing his own death in the process. We then see Superman in the next scene destroying a spy drone as if to say, "Hey, look, I had to learn to trust you, you can do the same." So he leads by example and says, "Guess I'll just have to trust you." In a final masterstroke, we hear Lois Lane say, "Nice to meet you, welcome to the planet." This last line works in three ways: the literal way, as in welcome to the Daily Planet; the inside joke between Lois and Clark, as in welcoming an alien to the planet; and finally, in the birth metaphorical way, where a baby is welcomed to the world, or the planet, when that baby is born. One did not see the full weight of John's sacrifice before, one can certainly see it now. John is always shown to see the big picture. Although he made it about the world not being ready, Martha informs us that it was always about whether Clark was ready or not. About him being able to bear the weight of the world on his shoulders, about him developing in the right way, reaching that egg before showing himself to the world, to have better guidance on the principles and ideals that he can represent. Jonathan's sacrifice was made with the foresight of the birth of a Superman, something only he could see at the time. And thus Superman is born. What he represents in Man of Steel is not a figure that can magically turn any situation into the most ideal one through some contrived and thus emotionally hollow plot device. Instead, we have a Superman that represents a faint glimmer of hope in an inherently tragic situation. We have a Superman that doesn't operate on moral absolutes. Instead, we have a Superman that uses ideals such as saving others, making sacrifices, and hoping that others can be a force for good as guiding principles to navigate in a complex and chaotic world. So when people say things like they didn't focus on the consequences of the destruction, or that there is a strange jump in tone at the end of the movie, they're looking at it backwards. The death and destruction is represented as the suffering Earth must endure to get a superhero like Superman in the first place. Just like a mother must endure a lot of pain during labor in order to give birth to a child. The focus is on the child, the newborn Superman, and as one woman said, all that pain is worth it.